Hello there and welcome Virtual Space Hero community to this also for me very special LinkedIn Live, and I will tell you why. Well, you know that I've been a researcher in new ways of working and new ways of learning for more than 8 or even 9 years in academia. And of course, research, teaching is very close to my heart. And today, my Virtual Space Hero research team is joining me here live on the LinkedIn stage. And why is that? Well, last year when we all had to move to the virtual space because of the pandemic and Corona and the situation, I had a lot of requests, of course, from other colleagues, professors, teachers, trainers, facilitators, in order to support them to move their in-presence trainings or classroom to the virtual space. But there was another target group that was also sort of really challenged or struggling with a new learning environment. And those were our learners. Why? Because we do know that online learning, blended learning, or e-learning, whatever you call it, has been around for the past 20, 25 years. Still, for many of us, it was not very usual, or we were not very experienced in managing ourselves in a virtual learning environment. And so, of course, also last year, I was hugely interested in conducting research about how do learners perceive and manage themselves when it comes to a virtual learning environment. And this is what last year, 2 of my interns started a research project with me. So Luca and Wim, a big thank you at this point for starting it with me exactly a year ago, more or less. And then I had in the autumn, in the fall semester, another research team working and continuing to work on the project, on the topic, and also producing many tips by themselves and tutorials and blog articles on how to improve our virtual learning experience. And so we're going to talk today about the other perspective, because many times in this Virtual Space Hero LinkedIn Live show, we are talking about the facilitator's perspective, the designer's perspective, learning and development HR perspective. Today, we are focusing on us as learners. And with that, I'm super happy to welcome on my Virtual Space Hero LinkedIn Live stage here with me, the Virtual Space Hero research team. And I'm welcoming Evelyn, Monika, Katja, and Hannah.
Hi there.
Hello there, everyone. It is fantastic having you with me here on the LinkedIn Live show from Virtual Space Hero. Really amazing. So it was you working for a semester on the topic of self-directed learning, on how do we manage ourselves, motivate ourselves in a virtual learning environment. And Evelyn, I'm going to start with you because you were the project manager of the whole team. So how was it for you managing virtually a research team on one hand, but then also studying virtually, managing yourself virtually, and studying the topic of self-directed learning and virtual learning environments? How was that for you, like the combination of all these small things?
Yes, I think what I learned the most during that time was the value of a good organization, both for myself but also for my team, because as a team leader, I was not only responsible for myself, but also for the rest of the team. And I have to say I was very lucky with all the members of this team. It was so wonderful to work with all of them. And yeah, it was stressful sometimes, but I think I managed it well. And I think all my team members did also.
Well, I see them all nodding. So Katja was like, yeah, she managed it super well. Katja, what was a success factor for you when you think about your virtual teamwork and the virtual learning situation?
Definitely the first point, Evelyn, as a project manager, definitely without her, I'm pretty sure it would not have run as smoothly as it did. And then just the fact that we could all work together so well, you know, and that we all had a really good communication throughout the project. We also, when we split the work, you know, we also sometimes did a video call and just did our work, you know, separately, but we're still on a video call so we could, you know, ask each other questions. So we were all very well connected, which I think was also really, really important.
Oh, that's a super nice example because it sort of reminds me a little bit of the Pomodoro technique, that you meet up, that you work together in the virtual space. We're definitely going to talk about that later. Hannah, if you think about the collaboration, the virtual collaboration, and I do know that you have been studying together for a few semesters already, so you knew each other, even though I remember that you have not been working together in this sort of constellation, I think. But Hannah, if you think about the virtual teamwork and how you work together, I hear that Evelyn was a super project manager, that you had a lot of trust within the team. What was it for you that made the virtual teamwork successful?
For me, it was, as Katja already mentioned, we didn't only work together, but we also spoke about different things. We got ourselves informed. How was your day? How are you doing? Are you struggling? How can we help you? So yeah, we worked together and we're also friends. So it made it really easy and also fun. And that's why I think we were successful, because we did have fun during the time.
That is good. And I do know that it was stressful because you get a lot of ECTS for this project course. And getting a lot of ECTS involves, of course, a lot of work as well. Monika, if you think about like being in the role of researching the topic of learning in the virtual space, but also that you had to learn the virtual space, and how did that work? Did you sort of apply some of the things that you knew from yourself to the project, or did you learn something out of the project that you then applied in your virtual learning sort of environment? What was the learning for you here?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. I think all of us brought a certain amount of knowledge already from before, from our last year's online learning experience. But on the way, as we were, working on our research, we were also learning from our findings. And when we had to read a lot about online learning experiences and previous research that was done in the field, we also learned ourselves a lot. About learning, about human behavior in the virtual space, about how learners felt over the past year, how educators felt over the last year. So we were really able to reflect upon the research that we did. For example, how important is the teamwork and flexibility, also communication skills. We also learned, as I said, some Pomodoro technique. We tried it ourselves during our virtual communication work on the research. So it was very interesting, and I think we took a lot of knowledge for the future as well.
That sounds fantastic. It's really good. And I really appreciated that a lot when we had the debrief about the project, the outcomes as well, that I think this project particularly was like a lot of learning, not only in terms of project management and the topic itself, but knowledge that you can apply to your daily sort of virtual routine, learning routine. And that's what I really liked a lot about it. But let's see, we have so many people here already from different platforms joining us. So thanks a lot. Virtual Space Hero LinkedIn Live, we are always streaming to LinkedIn, which is our main platform. We are streaming to Facebook and to YouTube, and we would love to get your comments and questions. And with that, I'm going to drag in already the first comment, and it's fantastic to see one of our colleagues, an international researcher here, Sveta Buko, saying that Virtual Space Hero is a great platform to connect junior researchers and experts and hear different voices and perspectives about 2021 online learning. Can't wait to hear from the research team. Thanks so much, Sveta, for your continued support and being with us here today. And we have one question already. So Athna is asking, thanks Athna for joining us here. Athna Knabic, she is the fantastic program director from Intercultural Management at the Carinthia University of Applied Sciences. It's amazing to have you with us, Athna. She's asking, did you manage to leverage individual strength during the teamwork? And if so, how? And that's a question I really like a lot because we also talked about that. Let us know who wants to go with that question.
Yes, I can start. So we knew which steps of the project we have to take, and we spoke about who feels the most comfortable doing certain parts of the steps. And this is how we actually split the work we had to do. So everybody had a say in what they want to do, what they feel good at doing. Mm-hmm.
That's fantastic. So make it very clear from the beginning on, right? To understand what do I like, and not only what I like, but what I'm also good at, and then split the task according to that. Katja, you were saying.
Exactly. Yes, that was really good that we had not the right, but the possibility to choose because the team was not as big. We were quite a small team. So again, it was really easy to communicate. It was also really easy to communicate if somebody was struggling with a task and to ask for help. So that definitely also helped. Yes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And do I remember correctly? I'm not sure. You also did the Belbin team role test. Did you do that at the beginning before you started the teamwork in general?
Actually,
Some did it, or
yeah,
Nina did it.
Exactly. The thing was with us that we already knew each other. So I think that what made it easier also to communicate among each other online. And I think it was really, Katja mentioned it at some point during the project, that it was so fascinating for us that we got the proof that it is possible to do a project 100% online, which was so wonderful and exciting to experience. We have never done this before entirely online.
And it wasn't a bad experience. I think I can speak for all of us. We did a good job.
I think I really like that because what we sometimes hear when we talk about virtual teams or virtual teamwork is that a team doesn't feel connected, a team feels like a bit lost or something. But as apparently you were setting up structures and activities very clearly, precisely distributed among the team members. And you were mentioning several times, and that of course is quite important. And I know that from the teams that I'm involved in is like the fun element of being part of a virtual team. So not to underestimate how important it is to take the check-in, to properly ask about what is happening in the other one's world out of this frame, because we were always joking with Sveta, with Edna, or with Anna, who's also part of the GCSE team, that, well, we're all limited to this frame, right? So sometimes we don't really know what is happening out there. So this genuine interest is something very important, and also to take that time to really sort of ask the others how they are doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I very much agree. I would say that it's especially during this COVID-19 times, during the pandemic and the lockdown, it should not be underestimated to bond, and really ask how we are doing and look out for our mental health also.
Definitely. Sometimes after the meeting, we also took a little bit of time just to rant and to listen to each other when we were done with the stuff, just because, we needed it too. So that definitely also helped.
Yeah, it was a good distraction from life.
That's really good to hear. I'm really happy to hear that. Let's go with the next question. So Sveta is asking, what a great team with interesting virtual teamwork reflection question. What methodologies did you use for your project, and how did online impact your data collection for the research project? Thanks and keep up the good work. So what were the methodologies and how did the online part impact the data collection?
Well,
well, who wants to start?
Well, as we are all students and this project was part of a course at university, we of course got some guidance and we were provided with tools on how to structure and organize a project, which I found very helpful to get started. And it really showed how important it is to, before starting a project, really do some thinking and group discussion and organizing, which is, it helps you a lot during all of the project.
Exactly. But the main way that we collected the data was, as we said, as you mentioned before, Vin and Luca already did some research. So we already had the questionnaire that we tweaked a little bit and sent out again. So that was how the data was collected. And we also did a literature review. So it was a mix of questionnaire and literature review in the end.
And it was interesting to remember, because also Sveta is asking how did the online impact your data collection? So it did not really impact that it was online, because we were, anyways, also in the past years, we were working with online questionnaires. But there was one interesting thing that I experienced also for the first time with this research project, that we had a very low, and also with the Vin and Luca in the summer semester, it was very difficult to get a lot of data, a good response rate. And that was something that was really interesting. Maybe it was due to the particular year. Maybe there were many researchers researching the topic, but that was something that was really surprising to us. Let's pick up on the question that Evelyn is asking. Evelyn is asking, how valuable do you think research will be in your future careers as intercultural managers? And I love the question. Let's comes out, because you know that we have been also together in the research seminar, right?
Yes, absolutely. I think that the research is going to be very important for us, but it was actually an eye-opener for me personally, because in today's world, when we think that everybody knows everything about online classes, online learning, oh, I know how to connect on Zoom, but it's not actually the truth. Just because we know how to connect in Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting doesn't prove that we know how to use the tool in a professional way and useful way for us. So when I saw the numbers, when I saw the results of our research, that nearly 57% of students do not feel comfortable being online, talking online, turning their cameras on, I was really surprised. And I am sure that my colleagues were surprised as well.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. And I also know that from experience, because I did my Erasmus semester online from Italy, so to speak, and in each course, there was no single camera on. The only camera that was on was the one from the professor. And I mean, of course, it was hard because it was a big group. I think it was 200 students, around 200 students. So of course, not everybody can have the camera on. But it was still really strange to see just black squares and just the teacher speaking, and nobody said anything. Nobody contributed. And it was, I was falling asleep nearly during the course. It's just because without the interaction, without the engaging, it's not interesting.
No, and this is not a fruitful place for learners to be able to collect information, to interact in this virtual space. There is no learning experience then if it's not a fruitful place for learners, both educators as well, to transmit the information, I think.
But if you reflect back, I can understand them. At first, I didn't really feel comfortable using the camera because I thought, why should I put it on? I don't like to be on camera. I hate it, actually. And now I know why we do it. And yeah, you're just forced to interact, and you cannot study online without having your camera on. It doesn't work.
Yeah, I think we're kind of lucky that we go to Fachhochschule Kärnten, because our teachers and professors always, reminded us, please turn the camera on. It's much nicer. Please make yourselves comfortable. Get yourself a cup of tea, of coffee. All of these small things, small tips help people to interact more freely, and I think it helps a lot.
These are already fantastic points to our today's question, because we're going to talk how to improve your virtual learning experience for 2021. So what we're saying is, or what you're saying is that, of course, we do know that learners might not feel super comfortable being on camera, but you have experienced, and we do know from research and from our review, that being on camera is something that helps you to improve your virtual learning experience. And the examples you were giving from the Fachhochschule Kärnten, Carinthe, University of Applied Sciences are amazing, because it clearly shows that lecturers at that university were sort of putting a lot of emphasis on the virtual learning experience. But let's talk a little bit about the whole learning aspect, because I was mentioning at the beginning, well, there is something that we're struggling with in the virtual space. And there is a concept that I started working with, or that I started writing about a few years ago, and it's called self-directed learning. Because sometimes, particularly in the virtual space, we need a higher level of self-directed learning. But let's start with breaking that down. What is self-directed learning for our participants here? Evelyn, would you like to go for that one?
Yes, of course. So I also read into the topic of self-directed learning. And it's actually, if you put it simply, it's working independently. So to truly be able to work by yourself. So this includes to identify what you need to learn. It includes to set objectives which are realistic, and ultimately, of course, achieving those learning objectives and evaluating afterwards on what went wrong, what went well, and what to improve. And in the process of all of this, you are developing a learning strategy and, trying to get the best fit for your individual learning style.
If you think about that, so it sounds like super basic and super clear, but what my experience is, for example, is that particularly that aspect of knowing and being able to evaluate my own knowledge gaps, setting and looking for content, how to fill them up and setting the goals for that, it's quite challenging, but particularly the motivation part. So what we heard now from, also Katja was mentioning, it was super hard. Sometimes I felt like falling asleep. And I myself know that if there is a lecture where I don't see anybody, sometimes I tend to fall asleep if I'm on webinars or whatever, and they're not good, I tend to fall asleep. But so how can you motivate yourself, for example, to stay in the learning process, even though you know that maybe the lecturer is not the best virtual lecturer, or it's not best structured, whatever? What are possibilities and strategies there?
What I did for myself, for example, is breaking down the content that I had to learn in really quite small portions. So I knew after the lectures for studying, for really sitting down and studying after the lectures are done, I only had to do that for 1 hour, 1.5 hours maybe, and then I knew I was done for the day. So that was something that definitely helped me in my case.
It's a fantastic example because it relates to what we call, from an instructor or from a designer perspective, it's called the chunking, right? So that we break the content down into small chunks and we learn with those small pieces, bits and pieces. What helped you else? What about the others? What helped you to stay with the topic, to motivate yourself to learn something?
Yes, to add to Katja's comment, I would say I'm a person, I love calendars and not the one online. I love physical calendars I can touch with paper. So I love to write all the deadlines down and have a great overview of what I need to do and when I can do it. So I can also plan a little bit. So I like to flexibly plan. So I can adapt to maybe the weather, go outside when the sun is shining, but also find the time to learn. So I think, yeah, being structured and organized is something that I find very useful.
I like that a lot, the flexibly learning, right? That's like the agile way of approaching, the new agile way of approaching. What about you, Hannah? What is your personal strategy when you think about learning? So we had like the chunking small bits and pieces. We have the preparation, planning, and maybe even what I do, for example, I use my calendar to structure also my days, mostly my working days. But for example, I put clear sort of meetings with myself into my calendar that I know when I need to do something. Of course, as you can imagine, I flip them to the next day very often, but it's also the flexibility in my calendar, right, Evelyn? We see it like that.
That's very important.
Hannah, what about you?
For me, I'm a very active person, so for me it is very important to have my activities also outside. So I struggled at the beginning to set boundaries because, yeah, you work from home, you sleep at home, you eat at home, you can stay at home all day long, so you really need to set your boundaries. And that's why I would agree with set realistic goals and try to fulfill them, but don't pack too much into your day. Otherwise, yeah, you're not motivated anymore. You need some motivation. You need to go outside as well sometime.
Yeah. I think that's a super good aspect you're putting there in terms of it's difficult not only for the people learning at home, but also for those working at home to distinguish between what am I doing now? Is this still work or is this still learning or is this already my private life, my private time? And I think one thing you were perfectly saying, it's important also to have that balance. Go out, change scenery if you can. I know that there are countries who are in lockdown again. So maybe if you're not able to change scenery, maybe it is to start your day really with some yoga. I can totally recommend the Body Project on YouTube. That is my absolute favorite. I'm following Daniel and his wife for the whole pandemic situation. So something different where you also physically engage differently. And one thing is also something that I'm not sure if it came up in our discussion or in another group, that sometimes people to start like the learning day or the university day, they sort of, or the working day, they put on shoes, they get dressed, they walk for 15 minutes around the block or around the area, and then they go back, and that's like the way to work or the way to university. And that's also like a trigger to understand, oh, now I'm starting, that's good. Now I went there and now I'm starting my whole learning process or my learning content, whatever. Exactly. It's also something that I liked a lot. Monika, what about you? What was your strategy?
I think my strategy was the last one you said. I would wake up early enough in the morning, do the tasks that I set myself to do, and then just, start studying, start working on them until 4. And then in my mind, it's already, end of the day, end of the working day. It's time to relax a little bit, and then if needed, do the rest of the things that I'm supposed to do. But normally in the virtual space, I think that I'm more of a technical kind of person. I like apps. I like funny, nice designed apps. So I set up everything in my calendar and then just take a look at what needs to be done. Yeah.
What would that be?
So I'm usually using regular Apple calendar, and I have a notes that are reminding me when there is something that needs to be done. All of these regular apps now have reminders, so I don't have to download anything special.
Fantastic. That sounds great. So let me pick up one of the questions. There is Brett asking, thanks, Brett, for your question. And it took me some time to pick it up, but here we go. So any thoughts on the importance of setting agendas ahead of time for virtual sessions? And how much do you ensure people to stick to them? So if I understand the question correctly, it could be applied on one hand to us going as instructors into a virtual learning lesson, like to a virtual classroom, but it could be also applied to the learners on how much should you structure, for example, your day of learning, if you learn for yourself, right? Maybe let's go from the learner's perspective, because from an instructor perspective, I would simply add that I definitely define learning objectives for most of my lessons, and I break them down and I make them also as clear as possible, but always being as flexible as Evelyn said. We need to be flexible and also be able to change that a little bit. But what about you guys, if you ladies, if you think about the setting agendas ahead for your virtual learning sessions, for example, how much do you stick to them, or how flexible should you still be? What is your opinion on that?
I mean, it always depends what sessions they are. If it's like, for example, a lecture, you cannot message your lecturer and be like, hey, can we move the lecture for half an hour because I didn't get out of bed yet? You can do that. So if it's a really fixed appointment, then it's really good to have it quite a lot in advance, or not a lot, but a few days in advance. You, as Evelyn said, you can write it down, you can see it, you know it's going to be there. But for example, when we had these small meetings where we just met to talk a little bit or to work a little bit and to talk about different arguments, and one of us said, yeah, I'm still eating, can we meet in 20 minutes, can we meet in half an hour? Of course, it's not going to be a problem. But I feel like there definitely has to be a balance between what appointment is it and how flexible can I realistically be.
Mm. Was question also related to engagement of the learners to the lecture?
Well, I think that probably it can be also related to the engagement. Would you like to add something to that, Monika?
Yes, so I think that learners have to get a feeling that this lecture gives an importance to them. So maybe through some reminders, how important this lecture is for them, what it is about, maybe send them some reminder, tomorrow is a lecture about this and that topic. Make sure to be there on time and make sure to prepare yourself with this reading or that reading. And I think it will help to lecturers to really prepare for that event. And they will also show up and be more engaged in it.
Also, the interaction is really nice because we're not physically there. We never see the lecturer, but during the lessons. So it is always nice to get a message with, yeah, you have to read this until then and then. Have a nice day. Just a small communication, but it's nice.
So it's important for us lecturers or for the designers of the learning experience also to think about to stay in closer contact maybe with our learners. And that's fun because the same applies, if you think about it, the same applies to virtual teamwork, because also maybe short messages and small messages or reminders in a virtual team, they help to be connected and to keep connected and to have that strong sense of team belonging.
Yes. It is also related to memory. If you memorize the lecture, if you memorize what you did in that lecture, if you receive, as we said, the reminder or an emoji in email, this is also something that it's going to keep us engaged.
And it also influences my motivation for that kind of subject, because if I'm curious about something and I write the lecturer an email and he never replies, I'm not going to be motivated for his lectures.
And of course, this also takes away the trust. Yeah, this takes away trust as well. The moment that communication is not working well. And Virtual Space Hero research team, just there are wonderful comments. So Adna is saying wonderful insights, amazing depth of reflection and application of knowledge. Thank you so much, Adna, for your comment. And also Brett is saying great insights and tips. Thank you. I would love to ask you one question, because we were talking a lot about how do you motivate yourself? You shared with us your strategies, which is fantastic. What were some of the insights that you would like to point out from our research? So just if each of you wanted to sort of throw in one or two things that you were really like surprised about or astonished or whatever. Maybe Evelyn, would you like to go for that and start with one of the things that you were really surprised about?
Yes, of course. So what comes to my mind first is the fact that the results of the questionnaires showed that a lot of people still prefer traditional classrooms over online classrooms. And when we looked into the answers of the participants, it showed us that a lot of lecturers, but also learners, don't know how to interact online. So one important message for me that I took out of it was that a lot of training is missing, because the online space has a lot of potential, but you need to have the right training in order to leverage those benefits.
I was gonna say the exact same thing. Just the fact that lecturers, especially lecturers, but also learners, are just not really sure on how to create a really engaging environment. And of course, we can't forget that it was a new experience for most lecturers as well, because they are used, if they worked for I don't know how many years as a lecturer, they're probably used to hold the lectures in presence and not online. So really, again, just the emphasis on training is really important.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and what I find really, really important is the work that Virtual Space Hero does for online learners and lecturers. By just talking and publishing online to the community, I think we're able to speak up about the problem and about the topic, and to make people, to give this information to people, how to behave. We also created a research project where you can read more about it. We created a toolkit, and we have tips on the toolkit and the calendar. So what Virtual Space Hero does for the online learners, I think it's very important.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, amazing research team, because all your valuable insights and tips and tricks will be published very soon from February onwards. We're going to look at that. And for those, because I think it's very important what you're saying, and Katja said, like, of course, it's the lecturers that we need some upskilling, because many of us have never been to the virtual space before 2020, right? So virtual lecturers need the upskilling, but also we as learners, because many of us are not used, and we forget that it's also our duty or responsibility to create the learning experience in the virtual space. And sometimes, and that's the problem, the moment that we switch off the camera, what happens? I don't feel connected. And me as a learner, that's also important to be aware of that. Mm-hmm. So also play a little bit the responsibility back here to our learners, participants, right? And students.
When we think about online learners now, it's more high school learners than ever who are learning virtually. It's not only university students who are already kind of educated in online learning, but kids, small kids from 10 years on. How do we educate them? So it's still a ongoing question. Yeah, Katja, sorry.
I see it from my cousins who are in primary school, who are 6, 7 years old, and they are really struggling with the learning from home just because they miss the personal contact so much. So it's also really important to help them to get on with online learning and make them comfortable with it.
Mm-hmm. And support them also by showing them possible platforms on how to work together. And just this week, I saw a post from a colleague of mine from Denmark, and she's a mother of 2 kids. And the post was a picture from her daughter behind, and she was in working on the computer with other pupils. I think she must be around 12. And the post said, it's so amazing to see how the professors or teachers are motivating the students to work on their own projects. They are exploring, they are learning, they are growing. And I'm like, oh my God. And what I see in Austria, unfortunately, is a horrible health scenario of teaching. And what I hear also from friends with children and from my own family, what I see is happening in the learning here is unfortunately totally students and pupils left alone in schools particularly. Hannah, what about you? Would you like to add another fact of the research that sort of surprised you or kept you thinking?
There's just one statistic that stuck in my mind, that 90% of professors say that their students are not able to remain maintain a friendly environment in the online space. And that really shocked us all. 90%, that is such a high number. And that just reflects everything we just said. What's going on at the moment, especially I think in Austria, because most of the statistics are from Austria.
I think that shows what we talked about earlier, that there is a large responsibility also on the side of the learners and not only the educators.
Yes. Absolutely. So I think one thing is to upskill and to learn techniques and get to know tools on how to structure and motivate ourselves as learners, but also to be aware of our responsibility. And for those of you out there who are educators or trainers or facilitators or professors, there is one possibility that you can upskill that we totally recommend, and it's a total virtual space here recommendation. There is a global educator certification program. It's a 3-month bombastic learning journey that will start again in September 2021. Sorry, we cannot start earlier. We just ran the first edition. And if you want to upskill when it comes to virtual learning design, to virtual facilitation, to virtual assessment, this program is absolutely unique. So if you want to go to the webpage, Global Case Study Challenge, you will be accompanying our COIL project with more than 600 students from across the globe and learn by observing the project and getting your own content to structure and upskill yourself as a global educator with virtual skills that are tremendous. So definitely have a look at that. I'm going to check again on the comments that we are having, and there is one question again popping up from Athna. Thanks so much, Athna, for asking us all your questions. So what are your next steps? How will you now transfer your learnings from the project to future online learning or work scenarios? Do you have a plan of action for that? Would somebody of you like to share something here?
Well, I think first we, of course, learned a lot for ourselves that we can put into action in the future. And I think I also got out a lot of valuable tips for others, you know, to help others also to have a better online experience. And I think it will be very valuable when we work in organizations to give important input on online learning, especially during these times.
Absolutely. So also, if you think about tools, and we slightly, we very briefly talked about tools, techniques. There is one thing that I want to pick up just before we leave now, because we're already coming at the end. So the Pomodoro technique. Who wants to go for that? Who was using it? Because I am a huge fan also doing Pomodoros in the virtual space. Did you try that out? Were you using it to some extent? How do you feel about this technique or even something similar? Nobody feels like
I didn't try it. I don't
Nobody
like
feels
it.
like
No. Personally, I'm not a fan of it.
You're a very good self-directed learner.
Yeah, I like to have my own methodology.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to know your own learning style and know what works for you individually, because there is no one fits all for learning strategies. Well, the Pomodoro technique, if I remember correctly, is in theory where you gather online, for example, in a video conference, and you have this sprints of learning. So you say, okay, we all are going to concentrate now, put our phones away, and you all work during these times, and after a certain time you get back together. I think it's maybe also during lockdown a nice way to stay connected even though you're learning by yourself, basically.
That's a good possibility. Yes, absolutely. So you have like those 3 or 4 sprints of 25 minutes, then you do a 10, 5 minutes break, whatever, and then you gather again. You work on your own. You are connected like we're here in the, well, we're here in a live stream, or we are connected on Zoom. But you can also use Pomodoro technique, and this is also sort of an outlook for everybody out there who wants to know more about working productively together. Virtual Space here is going to organize spacing sessions, and spacing sessions will include the information about how can we work or learn together in the virtual space productively and motivate each other. And I'm using Pomodoro there, and I'm going to invite all of you to join me in my first session 2021, because it's a beautiful tool if you're able to connect also the people who are there, and then structural work or learning in 3 learning sprints, exactly as Evelyn was saying. I think that's really a very nice tool. And we're getting another in comment here. Also, Thomas is saying, thanks a lot for the amazing tips. And I do know that Thomas, for example, he's a Pomodoro, to say so. So he's even joining with people from across the globe in online sessions where they work or learn together in these sprints. It is amazing. Evelyn, Monika, Katja, and Hannah, and Nina, who is not here today, but we're going to send you a very big hug here from the virtual space, your LinkedIn Live stage. It was tremendous having you here with me. Thank you so much. I'm super thankful for the research project and for the tips and tricks that you worked out for the report that will go online and will be published very soon. I'm super thankful for all your enthusiasm for this, for the research project itself. And I must say, I'm a little bit happy because I sort of hear that you became virtual enthusiasts and are not like, oh, virtual learning, virtual space, I don't want to do that, but that you are sort of a little bit more enthusiastic maybe with the virtual space than before.
It was very exciting. Thank you for having us.
Oh, I thank you, dear God. I thank you very much. And with that, we are already at the end of today's show. You know that I'm inviting you, and we're going, maybe Nina is able to join us for a virtual cocktail or coffee time backstage now. And with that, I'm saying thank you very much to all of you. And I see you backstage in a few minutes, right?
Yes, exactly.
Definitely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye, bye, bye.
Bye.
Bye, Monika. Bye, Katja. Bye, Hannah. Thank you very much. And with that, we're already at the end of today's LinkedIn Live. Thank you so much again for being with us. And, well, stay connected. Become a Virtual Space Hero. On virtualspacehero.com, you find the whole guest lineup. Until June, we are full already for this year. We have tremendous guests. And the next LinkedIn Live will be indeed this Thursday. So only in 2 days, we are going to talk about with William Thompson from Gallows Events on how to select the ideal virtual events platform for your event. And with that, I'm saying thank you very much for joining us. Thanks for your comments, for your questions. And I hope you're having a tremendous evening. And see you on Thursday.